Westworld is back, and Season 3 started with an explosive episode. But what happened, why, and what clues did we get about what will happen in the rest of the season? Hi everyone, this is Robert. Welcome to Deep Geek. I'll be covering Westworld Season 3 in full, so if you want episode breakdowns, explanations, live discussions and much more, please click the subscribe button in the bottom right of your screen, and the bell icon. Episode 1 of Season 3 of Westworld picks up just a short time after the end of Season 2. Most of it is about 3 months later on. We will come back to the Westworld parks themselves next episode, but this episode is all about the outside world. You'll remember that at the end of last season, Dolores escaped the island disguised as Charlotte Hale. She took with her 5 of the host pearls, had a chance to get inside knowledge on how individual people who had been guests in the park thought, and has access to a machine to make new host bodies. Now we see the beginnings of her plan to take on the world. Her first port of call that we see is to the house of one of those former guests at Westworld that she now understands. It would be easy to think of this as a simple vengeance mission on her part. He clearly hurt her seriously several years earlier on a trip to Westworld. Now she robs him, humiliates him, and leaves him lying dead in his swimming pool. But this was not just a random vengeance trip for Dolores. This was targeted to get her 2 things that she needed. A lot of money, she would need that to infiltrate the upper echelons of society as she intended, and confidential information about Insight, the all-controlling company of the Westworld future. And it's clear she has her sights set on that. Because next, perhaps with the help of that confidential information, she manages off-screen to meet and start dating Liam Dempsey, the son of one of the founders of Insight, and the man credited with developing the algorithms that seem to be managing so much of the world. Those seem to permeate into lots of different aspects of life, from traffic management to personal career choices. The pre-season trailers also seem to hint at an even larger role in guiding humanity to a safer, better future, or whatever Insight thinks is a safer, better future, I suppose. Anyway, Dolores is out to get to the heart of who is in charge. She gets herself invited in to see Rehoboam, the supercomputer at the heart of all this. I'm sure Rehoboam isn't a random name, it's the name of the first king of Judah in the Bible. Season 2 of Westworld had a quite Exodus-y feel to it, leading people to the Promised Land. Now she is in the Promised Land, and she talks of herself as being one of the gods. How is this relevant? Well, under the rule of Rehoboam, the Bible tells us that the people of Judah did great evil and made God angry. Rehoboam, the supercomputer, is ruling the world, and perhaps also doing great evil. And Dolores is angry. And also, perhaps there is a hint here as to what's going on in the wider background to Season 3. Rehoboam was the son of Solomon, a good and wise ruler. The original Insight project was called Solomon, again according to the trailers, so perhaps Insight's initial work, Solomon, was good, but what followed on from that, Rehoboam, was quite the opposite. There are also hints dropped throughout this episode that there are links between Insight and Delos, which perhaps shouldn't surprise us. Could they be the equivalents of the divided and warring kingdoms of Israel and Judah? We'll have to wait and see. To return to the action here, Dolores soon discovers that Liam Dempsey is actually not in charge. He's just the public face of it all. And he doesn't even have any real control over Rehoboam. The person who might, we find out at the end of the episode, is someone called Ciroc. He was one of the 2 founders of Insight, along with Liam Dempsey's father, who is now dead. And HBO have confirmed that this person we saw in the trailer is Ciroc, so I think we can expect Dolores to now try to get to him. Not that Dolores gets it all her own way in this episode. In the process of getting this information, she gets badly hurt, and Caleb discovers her bleeding in an underpass late at night. So let's talk about Caleb, the new character played by Aaron Paul. It's through him that we learn the most about this new world. He's a military veteran with apparent PTSD. His former employers have him in a program to help him through this, and the clear implication is that he has to do what they say in order to keep getting his benefits. And he does. He does everything that is required of him. He turns up for work at a job he doesn't seem to particularly get excited about, applies for jobs, asking for feedback on how to improve, attends counselling sessions, and takes calls from what appears to be an AI of his dead friend and colleague to help him talk through stuff. But it's not enough. The counselling doesn't seem to be working, he doesn't seem to be progressing in his career, and he has medical bills to pay for his sick mother that he can't pay. So in the evenings he uses an app called Rico, which connects people looking to commission petty crimes with those willing to do them. He doesn't do personals, crimes directly against other people, but instead he does bag drop-offs, cash point heists, and so on. I hope we find out more about the Rico app, like who's behind it, because it seems to be a way of organising and monitoring crimes that would otherwise be off-radar, like the thieves' guilds in so many fantasy worlds. Could this be yet another aspect of control by the machine? By insight, even? We don't know yet, but it's certainly very suspicious. Caleb is set up to show us not just that the lives of the 99% are managed to the extent that free will is almost an illusion, but to make us start to see similarities between most of humanity in this world and the hosts in Westworld. We see Caleb wake up each day in the same way as Dolores used to, see him coached by a voice he knows well, and go through his daily routine or loop with a slightly dead look behind his eyes. All this is a setup, though, to Caleb deciding to opt out. He unsubscribes from the calls from Francis and talks about wanting something real, which is when he meets Dolores. He sees her before and after her big gunfight with Martin Connells, the Insight security guy, and his lackeys. Apparently captive in one of those futuristic hoverplane things and then bleeding and injured in an underpass. He goes to help her immediately. She is the real thing he has been looking for. There are two main takeaways here. The first is, of course, that Caleb meets her and cares for her. This is one of the things they majored on in the pre-season publicity, so we were expecting it. But the timing is worth noting here. They meet just after he decides to exert his freedom. Expect part of episode 2 to focus on him nursing her back to health and their growing bond. This will be the first of the underclass humans she has spent any time with, and she won't have any inside knowledge on him from Westworld, so it will be interesting to see how she reacts. Positively, if in a rather manipulating way, I suspect. The second takeaway from this scene is that Dolores kills Martin Connells and replaces him with a host. This gives her a spy in Insight, someone who has been there for many years and is trusted. As well as Dolores, we need to keep an eye out for 5 secret hosts in the outside world this season, and we know now who 3 of them are. Bernard, who we'll talk about in a moment, Martin Connells, the security guy, and Charlotte Hale. I'll speculate on which host might be in Charlotte's body in my episode 2 trailer breakdown video coming out tomorrow, but for now, let's have a look at what she is doing in this episode, apparently as part of Dolores' big plan. As you would expect, Delos took a huge hit from what happened in the park, reputationally and financially. A malfunction in their theme park led to the deaths of over 100 people. As a result, their share price has plummeted, and the new board are worried about the future of the business itself. After the deaths of most of the previous leadership of Delos and William's absence, he doesn't appear anywhere in this episode, although he will be back later in the season. Charlotte is now the acting CEO of the company. There appear to be a few strands to what she is trying to do with that power. First of all, she is trying to get the company back in private control. It has obviously previously been floated on the stock market, and various investors held shares in it. The guy Dolores deals with in the opening scenes of the show was one of those shareholders, for example. With the share price plummeting, it becomes a lot cheaper and easier to buy back those shares, so I'm sure she will succeed. And once control is firmly back in her hands, she can start making more hosts and robots. Maybe the plan here is to build some sort of host army to take on the world. It's a scary prospect. As for any criminal charges or lawsuits following the massacre in Westworld, well, she's quite blasé about that. They can be settled out of court, and the authorities don't seem to concern her that much. Delos is still more powerful than most countries, it seems. And the parks themselves, they're just going to keep going. Westworld thrived on the hint of danger, and now it's just a bit riskier. Thrill seekers will still visit. And the final part of what she is doing with Delos is placing the blame firmly on Bernard's shoulders. Although the world seems to know that the hosts did malfunction, the news report we see refers to a manhunt for Bernard, saying that he was a disgruntled Delos employee who conducted a deadly rampage. Every tragedy needs a scapegoat, and this conveniently also makes it harder for Bernard to operate in the open to oppose Dolores' plans. So let's talk about Bernard. He is also in the outside world and has seemingly gone to ground to evade this search for him. He's shaved his head and grown his beard so he looks a bit different, taken on a new name, and found employment outside the city in a farm and abattoir. He does seem to be planning his opposition to Dolores, but his biggest concern is that he has somehow been compromised. He conducts routine self-analyses, checking whether his systems have been compromised or if Dolores has been in contact somehow. This is completely understandable given his history. He has spent most of his life thinking he was human, only to discover that he wasn't, was completely taken over and used by Ford for his own ends, then was killed and rebuilt entirely by Dolores, so he is completely her creature. But so far, unless he is deluding himself, he seems clear. However, some of his co-workers discover who he is and try to take him in, at which point he presses a button which seems to unleash a tougher, fightier version of himself, kills them and escapes. He clearly realises that just trying to hide away won't work, so he charters a boat to take him back to Westworld, presumably to find Maeve, who is the host most able to defeat Dolores. And talking of Maeve, we see her in a short post-credits scene. She wakes up in another one of the Delos parks, Warworld, occupied Europe under the Nazis. She was technically killed at the end of last season, but Felix and Sylvester were on hand to patch her together again. She doesn't seem to be completely herself yet. She looks with confusion at her hand, which she seems to have used to punch one of the Nazis with, before going to look out of the window and drink in the scene. We'll pick up on her story properly next episode. In Deep Geek, we'll be covering Season 3 of Westworld in full. The link to my Westworld Season 3 playlist is on the left of your screen, so please click on that if you want more episode breakdowns, discussions, and theory videos about this season. Or if you'd like to support In Deep Geek or get access to some of the content I create just for my patrons, please click on the link on the right of your screen. Thanks for watching, take care, and I'll see you again soon.